Welcome everybody, and thank you so much for joining us. It is so lovely to see you all, and we're so excited to be kicking off series 3 of our Reach Out Reach All webinars. And tonight we will be talking all things research. Dystonia UK is committed to supporting research to help further understand dystonia and the impact it has on individuals and on our community. And there are lots of studies taking place up and down the country, including research into the causes, the treatments and the management of dystonia. And we know these are of interest to many of the dystonia community. So we thought, what better way to keep you up to date than to be joined by 3 experts working on very different studies involving members of the dystonia community, to tell you all about the focus of their work and how you might be able to get involved. And we are delighted today to be joined by Dr. Claire MacIver, Derval McCormack and Richard Cave. So to begin today, it's fantastic to be joined by Claire MacIver, trainee doctor in neurology in Wales, on the Welsh Clinical Academic Track, WCAT, I'm told, fellowship scheme. Dr. Claire MacIver is currently undertaking a PhD funded by an association of British Neurology, the ABN, guarantors of Brain Clinical Research Training Fellowship. Her work focuses on investigating whether neuroimaging can tell us about the pathophysiology, apologies if I incorrectly pronounce that, of dystonia using techniques based on magnetic resonance imaging, so that's the MRI, and using the movement, so diffusion of molecules to look for markers of subtle differences in cells and their branching structures. Claire, I hope I got all of that right, but I'm going to hand over to you so that you can explain it properly. If you unmute, and off you go.
So thank you so much for letting me come and share this research with you today. So as has already been said, I'm looking at using brain imaging to look for really subtle microstructural differences in the brain in dystonia to try and help us understand it better. So first, I just want to introduce you to our team. So obviously there's me, and then there's my 3 PhD supervisors. So Catherine Peel is a consultant neurologist who specialises in movement disorders. And then Derek Jones and Chantal Tax, they're both physicists, so they specialise in the brain imaging bit. And so I'm well looked after between the 3 of them. So why does this work we're doing even matter? Well, ultimately, we don't really understand dystonia very well yet. And until we can understand dystonia well, we're really held back from improving treatments and held back from what we really would want to aim for, which is to have treatments that cure or completely do away with the symptoms that impact people's lives. But until we can understand what's going on, we're really held back from that. So we need that first stepping stone for other people to come along and do those things. So that's the context to the work that I'm trying to do. We do understand some things about dystonia. We understand that the movement centres in the brain are really important and the connections between them, and I've just highlighted some of them in the diagram. But when you or someone you know with a diagnosis of dystonia goes to the hospital and gets a brain MRI scan, when the consultant radiologist interprets it, the scan itself doesn't give them any clues as to what's going on. It doesn't help them diagnose the dystonia. In most people, it's completely normal. It just doesn't help us. At that level, we can't tell anything about dystonia. In the research world, though, lots of work has been done to try and use imaging to understand dystonia. And to an extent, some things have been found out. So these movement centres, the grey matter, have been found to have differences in dystonia compared to people without dystonia. And also the pathways that connect the different movement centres, again, they've been shown to be important, but all the things we're measuring are really non-specific things. So it's things like the volume, the size of a particular region. The size of a particular region being different can mean so many different things. It could mean there are more cells or less cells. It could mean that the branching between the cells, which is how the cells interconnect, are either more complex or less complex. Cells are more packed together, or even just the folding of the cell layers are different. So it doesn't really tell us if we see differences. Well, what does that mean for dystonia? We just see that there is a difference. And it's the same for all of the work really that's been done so far in brain imaging. So what we want to do is really zoom in on the detail. So we want to look at the cells themselves, and we're particularly interested in the branching of the cells and the way they connect together, because we think that there might be really subtle things that you can't see on a clinical brain scan about the way the cells are communicating and connecting that might be a little bit different in dystonia and might give us a bit of a clue about how it happens and why it works, and ultimately give us things to look at in terms of how we're going to treat down the line to get better treatments. So we're really lucky in Cardiff. We've got a scanner, a microstructural scanner. There are only 4 of these scanners in the whole world, and the one we've got in Cardiff is the only one in the UK. So we're so lucky to have this. And some work that my supervisors have already done, that's just been published, was the first study to scan people with dystonia on one of these microstructural scanners. So we're really lucky to have this and to get to do this work in dystonia. And they found some subtle differences using this the techniques that they've used in the cerebellum, which is one of the balance centers of the brain, that starts to give us a few clues about things. And now the work that I'm doing is really going to build on that to try and work out what we think might actually be underlying this. You know, what are the problems in the cells and the cell connections that are causing the problem with dystonia? So that brings us to the study. So we're doing a brain imaging study using this MRI in cervical dystonia at the minute. So we're just focusing on dystonia of the neck. And we're looking to recruit anyone with a diagnosis of cervical dystonia. Unfortunately, not at the minute people with genetically proven causes of dystonia over the years of 18 years of age. And whilst you absolutely don't have to live in Cardiff to take part in the study, you do need to be able to attend a session in Cardiff to have the scan. As I say, it's the only scanner of this kind in the UK, so we can't do it in other centres. So in terms of what the study involves, just to give you a bit of information, so as well as doing a scan of the brain, we collect lots of other information because we really want to make the most out of, you know, people giving up their time to do this study for us. We want to find out a lot about about the imaging findings. So all sorts of assessments of the dystonia itself, so a clinical examination of the dystonia, and also about other features that can be associated. So we've got some questionnaires and some tasks and things like that. So the whole session lasts around about 3.5 hours, give or take. So this is the scanner, just to give you an idea of what we do. This is the scanner that we use. There's a picture from the Kubrick website, so the centre website. So the scan's quite long. It's about 1.5 hours, but we can give you a film to watch during it. There's a little mirror we can put on, and the film helps pass the time. So it's a little bit better sometimes than a clinical scanner. The other thing is we can be quite careful with the padding we put around the head and under the neck, to try and optimize how comfortable it is as well. So we can do some different variations of things to just get you as comfortable as possible in the scanner. And obviously, if you volunteer and come and do it and you can't manage the whole scan in the end, it's absolutely not a problem. You know, any little you can do is really appreciated. So if there is anyone who's watching this that's interested in helping us and interested in taking part, or not really sure yet, but just wants a bit more information, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me. We can have a chat or exchange emails or whatever you like to give you a bit more information, and you can decide if it's something that you'd be willing to help with. You know, we're really excited about this work and the opportunity we've got to do this. And we're really hoping that you can, you know, really optimize our participation and get some interesting, hopefully, results to help understand this condition better. So thank you so much for your time. It's really appreciated. Thank you.
Oh, Claire, thank you very much. That was a great little presentation. We do actually have some questions for you, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
You mentioned that you don't have to be in Cardiff, but do people need to be able to, I'm going to start that again. Do people need to live in Wales to take part, or is it as long as you can get to Cardiff, that's fine? As
long as you can get to Cardiff, that's absolutely fine. Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. We've already scanned people from all over the place who've very kindly come quite far to come. So yeah, absolutely. If you can get to Cardiff and you want to get involved, you know, some people have friends in Cardiff or fancy holiday in Cardiff. So they've found other reasons to come and then done our study at the same time. So yeah, open to anyone.
And is there an amount of people that you're looking for?
Yes, so from the Dystonia group, we're hoping to scan around 55 people in total.
Okay.
And we're about halfway through that at the minute, so we've got a way to go. But...
Okay, brilliant. You mentioned a film, and then I got curious as to what is the film. Admittedly, that's my question, but still, what is the film?
A good question. So we've got a list of films. I would say, I'd warn you, it's not the most optimal film viewing experience. It's quite noisy in the scanner. We do put on subtitles, but it is, for a lot of people, it is nice just to have something to look at and focus on and pass the time a bit. Is all.
Yeah.
No, there's a range of films. You get a choice.
Okay, like blockbuster, brand new.
Yeah, they're quite like big name ones. Yeah.
Brilliant. When you're in the scanner, then it sounds a lot like it's similar to sort of an MRI scan, if anyone's had an MRI. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a type of MRI scanner. It's a very specialized MRI scanner. The main difference from one you might have had if you had one clinically is it's probably noisier. There's probably a little bit more shaking of the table just because it's really powerful what the system's doing. And the other thing, just to warn you, is it's not much difference, but it is a little bit narrower than a clinical scan. Not dramatically, but for some people, if you're very claustrophobic, they might notice the difference. That's probably something to know.
Okay. And do people get the results of this? What happens after the appointment?
So we're not allowed to give you a picture of the brain, and we don't, none of us are qualified to clinically interpret the scans. We do look at, we do look ourselves at the scan, and if we did see something unexpected, we've got a pathway that we follow via your GP, so we get your GP details and things like that, but obviously we're not qualified to interpret it. We're really, the sort of images we're taking are more, we're looking at a group level to, and it's not like you can see something on the scan, it's more kind of applying very complicated mathematical formulae to the data to look, to model differences basically. So it's not sort of an individual, I can see in your brain scan, I see X, Y, and Z, but hopefully on a group level, we might be able to say something about dystonia as a condition.
Brilliant, thank you. And do people have to have a specific type of dystonia to take part, or is it any type of dystonia?
So at the minute, it's just cervical dystonia, so neck dystonia. If you've got a little bit of dystonia elsewhere, but it's mainly the neck, that's probably fine for our remit. If you've got a different type of dystonia and are still interested in this, it's worth getting in touch with me, because I can get you onto our database, and I'm, post the PhD, I'm hoping to branch out depending on what we find. So absolutely, if you're keen, get in touch, and I can keep, I can keep you in mind when we hopefully do more work.
Brilliant. I'm sure that people will absolutely want to do that. Would you be okay to drive after it? I would imagine that you would be.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, it doesn't sort of impair anything, and people sometimes ask about food, you can eat before it, that's absolutely fine. Yeah.
Fabulous. And I think our last question is, did you mention it wouldn't qualify if you wouldn't qualify if it's genetic? Is that sort of an outlier?
Yes, so at the minute we're not including people who have a known genetic diagnosis, but as I say, if you're interested, then absolutely get in touch still, because I'm hoping it's not going to end at my PhD. I'm hoping to do more work after, and part of that may well be branching out into other types. So yeah, absolutely get in touch anyway.
Brilliant. I will watch this space keenly. Claire, thank you so much for not just the presentation, but for answering all of the questions. You're sticking around, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, looking forward to hearing everyone else's.
Lovely. So if you think of, if anyone watching thinks of any more questions, then please do type them in the chat. Obviously, if it's relating to Claire, if you could just put, this message is for Claire, or this question is for Claire, else it might get very confusing for the team. And I've just seen that someone's asked for contact details. We will do all of the contact details again at the end, and they will also be on the recording next week. So you will absolutely have a chance to have those again. So Claire, thank you very, very much. So now, something completely different. We have a long history of working with students of the clinical psychology doctoral course at Lancaster University to support their research projects, focused on the psychological effects of dystonia. Please forgive me, apparently today I'm just having problems pronouncing words. So we are delighted to be joined by Derval today. Derval is a trainee clinical psychologist currently completing their doctorate at Lancaster University, and Derval's thesis is looking at lived experiences of psychological distress in people with neck dystonia, so cervical dystonia. The purpose of the study is to learn about how individuals experience common psychological difficulties such as anxiety or depression, and it aims to highlight the need for increased psychological support for those with neck dystonia. So Derval, if it's all right with you, I'm going to hand over, and the same Derval will be presenting 5-10 minutes, and then there'll be time for questions afterwards. So please do feel free to pop them in the chat as you had before. Derval, over to you.
Thanks, Dana. So I'm going to try and share my screen. So far this evening, technology hasn't been on my side, as you'll notice from my blurred background. I wasn't able to get the Dystonia UK background to work, unfortunately. But bear with me, and this should work. Okay, so first of all, just to say thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. It's a real privilege to have this opportunity. I've been interested in dystonia research for a few years, and it began a few years ago back in Ireland. I worked in Vincent's Hospital in Dublin and became interested in this area, and it's kind of continued since starting the doctorate in Lancaster University. And I'm currently completing this thesis with Dr. Fiona Eccles, who's my clinical supervisor, and also Dr. Fiona O'Keefe, who's involved from Vincent's in Dublin as well. So as Dana said, the project is lived experiences of psychological distress in people with neck dystonia. And I just wanted to start by briefly explaining what neck dystonia is. And I'm aware that some of you will know a lot more about this condition than I possibly do, as you're maybe living with it on a daily basis. But for those of you who aren't familiar, I just wanted to give a quick overview. And you might notice that I'm saying neck dystonia as opposed to cervical dystonia. The reason being is that this project, which I'll explain a bit later, involves interviews with participants. It's qualitative in nature. And when I was designing it, some people with neck dystonia were involved, and they suggested maybe certain terminology might be more helpful. So this was one of the suggestions to call it neck dystonia rather than cervical. So I went with that. But it also is known by cervical dystonia, or also spasmodic torticollis, and it's the most common form of focal dystonia. It tends to be characterized by involuntary muscle contractions, mostly affecting the head and neck area. Symptoms tend to develop slowly, include things like head tremor, twisting of the head, and pulling of the neck. And while there's no cure currently for the condition, some of the physical symptoms can be alleviated by regular Botox injections, usually every 3 months. So I suppose historically, a lot of the focus in research and clinically has been on the physical motor symptoms that are present in neck dystonia. But over recent years, there's a little bit more of a focus on the psychological impact. So this is what we know so far. So quite a number of studies have reported high rates of mood difficulties. So when we talk of mood difficulties, in particular, we're thinking about things like anxiety, depression, and stress. And there's a couple of studies that I've included here just to highlight some of the prevalence rates of anxiety and depression in neck dystonia. So the first study here I've included is by Tomic et al. 2016. So they found depression to be present in 42.1% and anxiety present in 57.9% of their 19 participants. And then a few years later, Salin and colleagues did a similar study. They looked at 30 participants with neck dystonia and found similarly high rates of anxiety and depression. So 46.3% of participants reported anxiety, and 26.6% 26.6% anxiety and 46.3% depression, so quite high rates. We've also seen a lot of research which have reported the significance that it has on quality of life. So in terms of people's ability to engage in daily activities. A number of factors that are involved in this and the association between neck dystonia and reduced quality of life. So things like pain, fatigue, also disease severity, they're all found to be associated with reduced quality of life. And also thinking about stigma. So a lot of studies have reported high levels of stigma in terms of some of those postural abnormalities and physical appearance. So where does this study that I'm currently doing fit in? So at the moment, when we look at the literature into psychological distress in neck dystonia, there's a bit of disagreement amongst researchers at the moment. So some researchers say that there's a biological cause. So that psychological distress is very much part of the condition itself. So there's an organic reason why it's there. Other researchers report that things like anxiety and depression arise from living with some of those debilitating symptoms that come with neck dystonia. And the aim of this study is to explore how individuals understand their distress. Okay, so the thesis aims to investigate individuals' lived experiences using a qualitative design. So rather than sending out surveys and looking at numbers, we're going to be hearing stories and experiences from people through interviews. And it's hoped that this study will increase understanding of the psychological needs of this client group and highlight need for more psychological intervention. So at the moment, clinically, psychology doesn't really have a large role in this particular population. So I guess this study is hoping to hear from people who live with this condition on a daily basis and understanding, well, how are they experiencing anxiety? How are they experiencing depression? And what can we do to intervene to help them as appropriately as we can? So participants with adult onset neck dystonia will be interviewed by myself for 1 hour, and the interviews will take place on either MS Teams or telephone. And I'll be asking participants about their experiences of living with neck dystonia with a particular focus on the emotional impact that has. The interviews will be recorded so that afterwards they can be transcribed and analysed using, it's a bit of a complicated term this, but interpretive phenomenological analysis, or what's more easier to say, IPA. It sounds quite complicated, but it's a model that helps to understand individuals' own experiences and how they make sense of their world, their experiences, and I guess the world around them, things like that. So that's the type of analysis that we'll be using. I guess just to simplify that, it's looking for themes across some of the interviews and the data that we collect. So who's eligible to participate? So adult onset neck dystonia for at least 6 months, between 18 to 69 years of age, having had experiences of psychological distress, so things like I mentioned before, anxiety, depression, stress, and to be eligible, we're including people who experience these things either currently, since their diagnosis, or any time up to 6 months prior to diagnosis. And participants must also have a certain level of fluency in English, in the English language, so that they can engage in an interview for the hour that it will take place. The reason we've said must have had dystonia for at least 6 months is that we know that diagnosis of any condition can cause a certain adjustment period, which can impact how we're feeling. So it's so that the focus can really be on neck dystonia specifically. And then in terms of exclusion criteria, we're only including people with neck dystonia. So I am aware that sometimes you might have another type of dystonia alongside neck dystonia, but that might confound some of the results that we're getting. So we're only looking at people with neck dystonia, and then we're also not including those who might have any other serious concurrent health conditions which might impact some of the results as well. So just be aware of that. So in terms of next steps, the interviews are currently taking place. And if you'd like to get involved, I'm including the link which is on the Dystonia UK website, but you can also email me directly. And again, if that's to participate, or if you just wanted to hear more information, please feel free to send me an email. I'm happy to get back to you. I'm also including the references there at the end, which I've included in the slide. just for your reference. But yeah, thank you for listening, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Derval. That was really interesting. We do have questions, so I'm going to crack right on with those, but thank you so much. Do you need more volunteers? And along with that was, how many volunteers are you looking for?
Yeah, so I've currently, I think, interviewed either 6 or 7 participants at the moment, but we're looking for between 10 and 12. So we're not looking for a huge amount more, but we're, yes, still looking for a few more.
You're looking brilliant. And you mentioned Dystonia.
Yeah.
Can I ask why that was specifically chosen for the study rather than perhaps some other forms of dystonia?
Yeah, a couple of reasons really. One was that neck dystonia was the area that I'd looked at previously when I said I began my research a few years ago. So it almost felt like a bit of a natural follow on from previous work. The previous studies that I did back in Dublin used a quantitative design, so they hadn't really, hadn't interviewed or heard from people directly, and that was something that I was quite keen to do, to hear people's experiences. So it was for me a case of maybe following on within that population, but hearing from people and kind of getting those richer experiences through interviews. And also, you mentioned Lancaster University before, and that history of research in dystonia, and it just so happened that my supervisor was also interested in neck dystonia specifically, and had been keen to kind of get involved in some more research there. We do hope that this will follow on, and the plan would be that we do broaden this out to other types of dystonias in future. But I guess with qualitative research and the small sample size that is used, it's important to keep that sample as homogeneous as possible. So rather than include all types of dystonia where there might be different symptoms and different factors that impact on distress, it was important to just focus on one. But yeah, I guess going forward, I would hope to look at other types of dystonia.
Okay. And so if someone had neck dystonia, but also blepharospasm, so eye dystonia, would that exclude them from taking part at this point?
It would for this particular study, unfortunately. And again, it's just the nature of qualitative research. And we've had that before previously when, like I said, I've kind of started the interviews at the moment where people have had 2 types, and unfortunately they haven't been able to participate in this particular study. There is, I suppose, I know that this is one thing I have said before, that if people were keen to be involved in some way, I mentioned having people with dystonia involved in the study design. So remember I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation around terminology. So if somebody wanted to get in touch, even if it wasn't about getting involved to participate in my study now, but they maybe wanted to, be involved in terms of design for a future project, please get in touch. I'd let you know if, future projects that are coming up and getting involved in some way. But yeah, unfortunately, not as a participant for this thesis.
Brilliant, thank you. And you mentioned again about the qualitative nature of the study. So how do you ensure that the results remain objective, or sort of can you talk us through a little bit more about how you interpret the interviews?
Yeah, so it's quite a long process, IPA, and there's lots of different steps involved. It's been heavily cited, and there's lots of publications on how to do that. So it involves going through each. So basically, when I interview people, like I said, the interview will be recorded, and I'll transcribe that afterwards. And each interview transcript will be gone through and searched for different codes. The codes then turn into different themes, categories, subcategories. There's lots of different steps. And I'll also be asking other students who are completing my course to cross-reference to make sure that those same themes are emerging. So it reduces that objectivity. Obviously, with qualitative designs, there is always a part of the researcher that is, it's more difficult to remain objective in comparison to quantitative, but that's why we have different steps in terms of supervision and cross-referencing to reduce that as much as possible. I know it is a bit more complicated. I'm trying to say that as quickly as possible because I'm aware of time, but
no, I think that was really clear. It's I guess understanding or letting people understand the how it works, because obviously when you hear people's stories, it's how does that actually translate into helping the study. But I think you explained it beautifully. And then I think our last question just before we move on, and we'll have some time for some more questions at the end for all three of our speakers, is from the findings of your study, is it your hope that there will be better psychological support services developed to support people with dystonia? Or if not, what impact do you think it actually might lead to?
Yeah, so I mean, ideally that's the reason why I'm doing this study, to highlight the need for more psychological intervention and to highlight specifically what is needed. And I guess, yeah, I guess that's the main reason. What might happen is that it might inform future research, or the need to explore it further, as you mentioned before, broaden it out to other types of dystonia before those steps kind of get done. But absolutely, that's the reason why the research has taken place.
Brilliant. I mean, Derval, thank you so much. That was a lot of information, but I think
whistle stop tour
very well. And as I said, we'll have time for more questions for Derval at the end if people have them. So feel free to still put them in the chat to Victoria. We are ending on something that's, again, quite different, with an update on some projects funded by Google. And talking on the subject, we're very pleased to introduce Richard Cave. Richard is a speech and language therapist based in the UK, a PhD candidate at UCL, and a national advisor to the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists for voice banking, and recipient of the 2022 Allied Professional Award from the International Alliance ALS/MND Associations. Richard works with Google, providing specialist SLT consultancy to the Relate, Euphonia, Look to Speak and Activate projects. Hope I pronounced all those correctly. He also works with MND Association, providing training and practical support for voice banking and communication technology. And prior to qualification as an SLT, he worked with the IT industry for 18 years. Richard, I apologise if I've managed to mess up any of those words, but I'm going to pass right over to you for your presentation.
Thank you, Dana. That's just fabulous. You know, it's a story of my life to have to follow Claire and Derval with their just amazing presentations. I thought I was so interested, so interested in their work. So as you say, I'm a speech therapist and I work on lots of different projects, and part of my time I work with Google on what's called Project Relate, and this is a completely new technology which is speech recognition for people whose speech has changed for whatever reason. And the idea behind it is for people to keep talking, say what they want to say, and to be understood. That is the goal. And this technology can be trained on a phone to better recognize not only the way people speak, but also what they say. And those are two very distinct challenges. This technology, like I've said already, that is very young. It's only been in the UK since January. So everything I tell you is because I have the emotional scars since January. And the most important thing for me is that the dystonia community, along with all the other communities that have changed speech for whatever reason, get to feedback, get to say what they think of it, because it's a very live project at Google. There are lots of engineers working on it. The thing is, they don't know you, and they don't really know about dystonia. And so this is our opportunity to directly feedback to the people that are writing all this incredible code, all these incredibly bright people who are at least half my age, to just help them do the right thing, write the right thing for the dystonia community. And so everything I'm just going to demo it to you now, but it's completely free and it's completely available right now. You can download it on the Play Store. It's only on Android, of course, but hopefully it'll come to Apple soon. And the idea, what I really want, this isn't a structured piece of research like Claire and Derval's is. This is what I really want, is I want to hear what you think. And I think I'll just put my email in the chat soon. But what's really important is for the, anybody that feels like at times it's hard to be understood by, say, an unfamiliar communication partner. And I'd invite you to try it out. Now, this is not like your regular app. You don't just download it and use it. Unfortunately, communication is far more complex than that. And so this technology needs to be trained. You need to record a minimum of 500 phrases into the app using your phone or your tablet. And these are phrases that are given to you. You actually have a choice of 6,000 on the app, and you can zoom across to whichever one you would like to re-record, and you just record it on the phone. And the second part is understanding the words that you use. This is really important because in our lives, there are proper nouns, people, places, and things that are special to us, that matter to us, family names, places, all those things that matter to us in our daily lives. Technology such as speech recognition technology relies on something called large language models, which is great. But large language models, however large they are probably not going to recognize all the proper nouns that you use in your life. So we can train, or you can train, this Relate app for all the words in which you use in your life. And if you have, bear in mind, you need to record a minimum of 500 phrases. Either you can use the phrases that are in the Relate app, or you can add your own words for it to learn, or you can do a combination of both. And there are some people I'm working with at the moment that have like 700 friends, and I'm very envious. And so we kind of they are adding all those names in, and just so Relate is learning how those people speak with the words they use. So I'm just going to show you this, and this is the beauty of a live demo. If it goes wrong, I'm sorry, but if it goes wrong, then it's quite nice because we can talk about that too. Now, Dana, please stop me if we are running close to time, because I'm doing a super whistle stop tour. But I do not want, if anybody's got any questions, I want to talk about that. So this is my phone, and on it is the Relate app, which I downloaded from the Play Store. It's called Project Relate. You just register for it. It's only for over 18s, but it's for anyone. So, and the first thing that you're asked to do is to record phrases. And so I mentioned that there are like 6,000, and there are a lot of phrases. And there are lots of people that would prefer more straightforward sentences. Others would like shorter sentences because of breath support, or whatever is easiest for them, let's use that. And I mentioned about adding words that I use in my life, and there's a little plus sign on the top right. And I don't know, I'm feeling very unimaginative today, so I'll just say Richard Cave. So that's a proper noun, and I'm just going to record that straight away. Richard Cave, and it moves me on to the next phrase, or I could choose any phrase I like, just as long as I get to a minimum of 500. Once I've hit 500, within a couple of days, I'll get an email back from Google to say, right, we think we've got a personalized speech recognition model, which we're going to download to your phone. At that point, pretty much everything is offline, so you don't need to be connected to the internet to run this. There are 4 options for you. The first is called Listen. It's live transcription. So I'll just start talking, and it will transcribe my speech as I speak. Now, I fully appreciate I'm not the best example of this because my speech is not particularly changed. But the point is that what it's doing is it's adding to the signal. It's not replacing any part of my communication. And the thing about speech therapists like myself is that when communication becomes difficult, when speaking becomes difficult, often we provide other things like an iPad or a text to speech or pen and paper or whatever. And that has various positive and negatives. The positives are people can be clear by what they want to say by using an alternative method. The drawback is it can be a lot slower. In fact, it will be a lot slower. And because it's a lot slower, then people often feel a bit worried about participating because they're so much slower than everybody else. And other people, often things just change the subject and they're for like answering a question that was 3 questions back. All these things, there's a good evidence base around using alternative communication, the pluses and the minuses. What people, at least in the communities that I work with, particularly in motor neurone disease, is what people usually say to me is, I'd like to keep talking, thanks. And I'd like to keep being understood. And that feels very natural. And so with this tool, although it's not perfect, it's supporting what people may really want. Now, the other piece about it is that I can say anything I like here, and I can copy it, and I can put it in Twitter or Facebook or WhatsApp or wherever I want, and I can edit it. So we can go back to more slower forms of assistive technology on the same screen. I'll save that, and you've got it all in history. The next thing is called repeat, which is speech in, synthetic speech out. That's usually for transactional. So if I want to go to the coffee shop and I don't want people to show, I don't want to show my phone, I just want to use speech, I can use that. Can I have a large cappuccino, please, to go?
Can I have a large cappuccino, please, to go?
So it's kind of more transactional. And I'm glad I'm not a betting man, because I didn't think this would be very popular. But actually, for people using it, particularly in a kind of head and neck cancer world, this is really popular. I suppose it makes sense because it's all about speech. If we want to talk, let's talk, whether it's with my voice or a synthetic voice, but let's use speech. That's how it seems to me. And of course, because if it's speech in, speech out, you can talk to people and devices. And there are many people that live with Alexa, Siri's, Google Homes, all that incredible technology that's in our homes and in our phones. For people with non-standard speech or speech that's changed, often those devices don't understand them. But with this, you can use it as a kind of a middle person. So it's completely agnostic. Although it's a Google thing, it's completely agnostic of what system people use. I think I've set this up for Alexa. Turn the lights off.
Alexa, turn the lights off.
And for people whose speech is changing or has changed, to actually be able to, I kind of really hope no one's lights actually went off there. For people who are used to not being understood by devices, this is quite neat. This is quite neat because it actually works. So the third and the fourth is assistant, and so this is using whatever speech people have trained the device on to talk directly to Google Assistant. Now, these digital assistants are incredibly powerful. Like if you have Alexa, it's already been documented that there are more than 100,000 different uses for Alexa. But that's not much use if Alexa doesn't understand you. It might as well be 0. And so this is the power of this technology is not going away. One thing that, it is forecast that by the end of next year, that there will be more things that you can communicate using voice than there are people on the planet.
Wowzers.
So that's where this is.
That's quite a statement.
Yeah, that's where this is. Voice activated stuff is not going away. And we have to look after our communities that cannot access it. We have to, because it's not going away. It's just an example. Downstairs in my kitchen, I could talk to my fridge. Not that I plan to, but I could adjust the thermostat on my fridge. And already in my car, I can tell my car to change channel and all the rest of it. And, you know, I am at the tender age of quite old. And yet, even in my life, it just feels normal. So imagine kind of, you know, the younger folks, it's just everywhere and people are expecting it. But the problem is there are so many of our community that are being excluded, and we cannot have that. So the
I'm going to stop you there if you don't mind, just because I'm
Please.
conscious we've got a lot of questions coming in, and only about 8 to 10 more minutes to go before we're running too over. So
Yeah.
Are you all right if I jump in with some questions?
Please do.
What I'm cutting off that you said.
I'd much rather that. So yes.
Amazing. Right, I'm gonna jump straight to the questions, and thank you to everybody that's given our questions. What research has taken place to help form the app?
What's happened so far is that I'm doing a PhD and it's on Relate. So my background is working with people with motor neuron disease. So I'm working on the experience of people living with motor neuron disease using Relate. And this is particularly challenging because with progressive neurology like MND, voice changes. And so the question is, how long will something like this be functionally useful for people whose voices are changing, and actually what are the parameters of functionality generally? So that's my piece. In terms of the work within Google, speech recognition has long been a kind of a strong suit for Google, and also there's been, you know, there's a lot of evidence that is underlining that speech recognition, as it stands for people with standard speech, for want of a better word, is inequitable as well. So if you have a significant accent, or if you use words that are particular to your community that are not known to the language model underlining the speech recognition model, then you're not going to get the same level of service as somebody else.
I wonder if that's why my device prefers my husband talking to me.
It could be.
Yep, she'll answer. And are users on the app now helping to contribute to sort of the future development of the app? Yes.
So part of the reason why I'm so happy to come today, and I'm coming up to the event in Newcastle as well.
Absolutely, can't wait.
Is to try and include as many communities, as many people as possible, because, you know, Google have built something I think quite special, but is it right? Is it meeting the needs of the Dystonia community? Is it meeting the needs of other communities? We just don't know. We don't know because we haven't asked you. So now I'm asking you. And so let's have a conversation about that. And actually what would be wonderful is to have a more structured research like Claire and Derval are doing. The challenge for me is we could do that, but the technology is being built right now, and it would be wonderful to get some feedback, as you know, as ongoing feedback, because we can go straight to the engineers who are actually building it and tell them what's working and what's not.
And how long on average does it take people to record 500 phrases? Because when you say it feels a little overwhelming. Is it when you're actually recording it?
It does feel overwhelming, and this is the biggest challenge, because it's all the work first without any of the reward It's like you have to do the work. And some people literally spend a few months because it's just boring. It's like, I can think of 100 better things to do than that, probably more. Other people really want to try it out. What I recommend is something a bit more complex, is that if you want to try this, then have a think about all the words that matter in your life, or the people, places, and things, and record those. That's extra work. But from what I've seen in these 5 months of working with people pretty much daily on it, is that if Relate recognize the words that we use pretty much off the bat, then it's going to be more functionally beneficial.
Yeah. And why 500 specifically?
That's the lowest that that the team have come up to create a viable model.
Okay.
They are looking at lower, but in my opinion, the more the better, although there are reducing rate of returns.
Okay. And you mentioned it's on Google Play. Any ideas on when Apple may decide to allow it on the App Store?
Honestly, that is the #1 question I get asked. And there is not one day I'm not. And the quality of my life will improve significantly once Apple get it on their store. I don't know is the answer. But what I do know is everybody on the team's getting asked the same question, and long may that continue.
Brilliant. And we can obviously, we can pop on our website and on our social media channels when it is available on the App Store as well.
Yeah, lovely.
We'll get that out there. Can you confirm, does the app include speech to writing? And if it does, which I think you demoed, if I understood the presentation correctly, is it word limited, or can you do larger bodies of text? You stopped the recording and I thought maybe that was a word count limit.
So you can do speech to text. The one thing I didn't show you was that Relate is not only an app, it's a keyboard. So whatever tool you use, whether it's Microsoft Word, Google Docs, Twitter, WhatsApp, whatever uses a keyboard, you can substitute your typing keyboard for a voice keyboard, which is Relate. And in that situation, I'm working with a man living with Parkinson's here in London, and he's writing a book. He's writing a book using speech to text into a Word doc, and he's just, because it's very difficult for him to access. So he's speaking the book, he's working with his wife, his wife's doing all the proofreading, editing, and saying, is that what you mean? Nothing's perfect because captioning isn't perfect, but is it functional? In that sense, it probably is functional because they're using it. So yes, you can do speech to text for pretty much any length in a Word doc or wherever.
Brilliant, thank you. And I guess this is a question, you mentioned your age and younger colleagues designing it and that kind of thing, but what if you're not tech savvy? You know, is it easy to use, and what kind of feedback have you had?
This is a challenge because it's technology, and you know, we all deserve, we all should have the support that we need to work technology, and this is no different. It's tried to be built in a straightforward way. However, communication is complex, and this app in some ways reflects the challenges. So what I do is I spend my time training speech therapists on Relate, because I feel that the speech therapy profession and any other health professional should know about this and be able to support. And you know, it's just a challenge. Unfortunately, there's no easy way, and it's made it harder because people have to do all the work up front and think of all the personal words up front. And so it's kind of, you know, Google may market it as an app, but actually it's far more than that. So yeah, my best advice is to if you need help, if you'd like help, get in touch and I'll try and help.
Do you have any data about sort of the age groups that are using it?
No, we don't, because we don't capture that kind of information at all. Okay. We don't capture anything. There's nothing about etiology. It's not that kind of an app. It's just an app anybody can download.
But my last question for you, Richard, Is the app accessible for the visually impaired? And if not, would you look to develop suitable updates for that?
That's a lovely question, and it is not. It is. I don't think it's been. I think there's plenty that we can do with the visually impaired community to make it better, and that's something that we need to do. For those folks that use a switch, if it's switch, it is switch accessible, but it's not fully accessible the way it should be. I think this is quite typical of you know, an app that's not even 6 months old here. But you know, I think we have got. I'm a believer in it. It's very powerful, but there is a lot to do and there's a lot to learn, and we just need to keep learning.
Well, it's still in its infancy, isn't it? It'll grow, and the more people that use it, the better the app will become. So everybody that can or wants to download it, please do. So Richard, thank you so much for answering all of the questions, for showing us Relate. It looks like a brilliant app and could really be pretty life-changing for some people. So thank you. So anyone that wants to download, we'll pop the details on as we always do. Couple of questions which I'm going to open up to the floor. So please feel free to jump in, but I'm going to, I think, start with Derval and Claire. I think you're probably aware from some of my previous questions, we get asked a lot why a lot of research studies are so focused on neck dystonia. And do you think even if people with other types of dystonia don't take part in the studies, that the learnings may be helpful for future treatments or interventions for them as well?
Do you want to go first, Derval?
No, work away, go ahead.
Yes, I think that it is a problem. I think because neck dystonia is, I've learned something today, thank you, neck dystonia is so common, it almost is an easy first step to do these things. So for my work particularly, what it's quite important is to get, because dystonia is such a spectrum, when we're doing this first work in this area, is to get sort of a group of people that are as similar as possible, to say in a similar group of people can we see them, and then hopefully branch out. But a lot of the findings you see in one type of dystonia are likely to be applicable in others. But yeah, it is tricky, isn't it, when you're just investigating, you know, one type and there's such a spectrum. I mean, I do think the work that we're doing, we definitely want to branch out. It's just as a starting point, neck dystonia is a good starting point. We can hopefully get a big group of people to get meaningful results, really.
I was on mute. Derval, do you agree, or do you have anything to add?
I mean, just completely echo what Claire said. I think it's a starting point, isn't it? And I think ideally we would love to include as many people with dystonia as possible in our research. It's the nature of research, as Claire was saying, to keep a sample as similar as possible. There are certain restrictions that we need to put in place for the purposes of that study, but we would hope that the results can be more generalizable to dystonia as a whole, and I guess to broaden out the research going forward. And I guess thinking of the study that I'm doing in terms of psychological distress and what that might inform, often neck dystonia, individuals with neck dystonia are often treated in hospital departments alongside other types of dystonia. So I would hope that if we were to get more psychological intervention into these services, that would be offered to other types as well, even if they weren't included in that specific research itself. So yeah, it's just the nature of research as well, but fingers crossed we can broaden this out more.
Brilliant, thank you. And if I'm honest, I'm not sure which one of the three of you wants to take this question, but please someone jump in. Do any of you know whether people with neck dystonia cervical frequently change their speech? Ooh, that's a lot of quiet. I'm going to guess the answer is no, but
yeah, I guess if it's isolated neck dystonia in the clinics, we don't tend to see huge changes. But I think a lot of people can have dystonia that affects the speech apparatus, And, you know, some people can have a bit of both, so you can see some overlap, I guess. Does that fit in with your experience, Richard? You're probably more experienced at that than me.
That sounds right to me, and that I don't think I could have given a better answer.
Brilliant. I mean, guys, thank you so much to Claire, to Derval, to Richard, to all of the audience for staying with us. I know we ran a little bit over time on this one, but thank you so much. This is our first research specific webinar. We often put stuff on the website, out through our social media channels, and in our Dystonia Matters magazine. So please, for everybody that has come along, if you could let us know if you enjoyed it, if you enjoyed the format and the way that we've done it, that'll let us know whether or not this is a good format to put out this kind of information in. So please do, as I said, let us know. I'm going to let you all go and eat your dinner now. Thank you to everyone that attended. Thank you to my team behind the scenes, Bernie on tech, Vic on questions. They are, as always, brilliant, and the only reason I get to sound at all intelligent is because of them. Claire, Derval, Richard, thank you so much for your presentations. Hopefully we will see you all again soon, and good luck with the research. I hope it goes really well and you get lots of people. Everybody else, have a lovely evening.
Bye everyone, thank you.